I'm impressed at my own chutzpah. I call this the problem of suffering. It's the problem of suffering and its resolution. Bit presumptuous, isn't it?
Go for it.
I just wanted to say before I started talking, what I've been talking about, what kind of attracted my attention in the last few weeks and before Christmas, it's quite heavy duty stuff, really, quite serious, and it's about the confusion we have about the sense of self. And I do want to say that none of this is really relevant unless you've already established some kind of healthy ego. These talks are really for all of us, for all healthy neurotics. They're not really for people who have a weak sense of self or a serious lack of self-esteem, because otherwise it's trying to demolish or diminish something that isn't yet fully formed and needs to be formed in order to function properly. So I do want you to bear that in mind. This isn't for everybody. These what I'm talking about, and it's very much why traditionally it was made very difficult to enter a Zen monastery. To enter Zen practice, they put a lot of obstacles in your way before you were allowed in. And I don't think you could probably have put up with that if you did have a low sense of self-esteem or a weak ego. Although certainly traditional Zen has never dealt with those things, has never tackled them. And so you do get people coming into practice that really should be in therapy, to begin with anyway. And a lot of us need to be both in practice and therapy. So there's no separation. But anyway, so what I wanted to talk about was to go back to this core of the Buddhist teaching, which is the Buddha's view that the sense of self is fabricated. It's a fabricated and conditioned reality which we defend and protect and maintain in all the possible ways that we can. This idea of the self. And really, I suppose, finally, Buddhism is the Buddhism of the original Tathagata is about tackling this very profound question of, is there a self or not? And if there isn't, then it brings a whole different paradigm to the way we experience and view our life. And if there is, then the Buddha was wrong, because he said there wasn't one. So if you're really going to explore and investigate this whole question, in a way it isn't for that's why I started, the talk the way I did. It isn't for people who don't feel already quite solid in themselves, because it requires quite a profound change in view. So it's not for the faint-hearted. And this practice has never really been for the faint-hearted. And at the same time, as I said last week, the kind of warrior attitude that's been invested in it because of the whole samurai martial arts thing is also misplaced. Because the warrior thing is just another way of reinforcing the sense that you have of an I. So, but if we assume that the Buddha was right, that the sense of self is a misconception, and let's call it a misconception, it's not necessarily wrong, then to some degree, and I'm nervous to go the whole hog and say it all is, but to some degree our suffering is imagined, which I know is a real affront can be a real affront. And I don't mean all suffering. Obviously, if you're suffering from terrible toothache or physical problems or whatever, then that's real suffering, you know. I'm not diminishing that. But certainly, a lot of the suffering that we have around our sense of who we are, or being slighted, or being angry, or being upset about lots of different things, or not being acknowledged or recognised, all that, if there isn't a real self, is imaginary. I mean, we've created it, you know. We ourselves have created it. And although we may know that intellectually, we can't just by an act of will stop it. We can't say, well, you know, I know the sense of self is fabricated, so I'm not going to be identified anymore with myself. It doesn't work like that, you know. I mean, I've never succeeded in doing those things by an act of will. So how do we progress? And I suppose my sense is we progress by starting off at the place where we intend to, the direction we intend to go, which is we give this idea some credence, and we, even if it's only an intellectual understanding, we act as if to see if it works. And because if we start, it gets really tricky and complicated, and I'm sure this will resonate for you all. But once if we're feeling, you know, upset, suffering, we don't feel at one with our life. We feel some separation. We always feel there's a gap in our life. It's never quite right, and we decide that that's what we're going to fix. All we're doing is fixing the sense of I again. So we're actually reinforcing the whole thing that at the very beginning caused the suffering. And of course, if your eye's like my eye, there's nothing more that my eye likes than to have a meaty thing to sort out, you know. And it particularly likes having a fight with itself, because it really feels alive then. You know, the old warrior Zen can come in there, and I can really, there's parts of me that I don't like, I can really have a battle with them and squash them. And I can feel a great sense of satisfaction afterwards that I've won, that this eye has won over that eye. But of course the whole thing reinforces separation. So you know, the whole thing is quite tricky. So you know, how do we find a harmony between the life of the small self of the I, or of the relative life, and what I've taken to call, kind of, for myself, it works, the great life, or the fundamental life, or the true life, or however you want to call it, this ground of being, which not just in this tradition, but in any mystical tradition, is experienced as being the foundation on which everything else arises. And in Zen we call it shunyata, or the translation is emptiness, which I don't really like, but that's what we call it. So how do we get this balance between leading our lives, having a kind of functioning ego, and also recognizing that it's all, in a way, a figment of our imagination? Yeah. So it's a subtle and it's a subtle and knotty problem, because what we're doing is we're doing our damnedest to solve a problem that finally doesn't exist, which is the problem of the self. So how do we do that? how do we do that? Well, I think for me, the most important thing, which I've said before, and I know which is hard for us all, and hard for me, is we both have to be, you know, we talk about great doubt, great endurance, great faith, we really have to cultivate our ability to endure, to practice. We have to cultivate our faith, and the way we cultivate our faith is through the cultivation of doubt, and out of the doubt, if we really question it, then my experience is we arrive as a greater faith. However, in the midst of all that, what we need to be is kind to ourselves. Because if we aren't kind to ourselves, we then slip into this sense of separation again. You know, there's a part of me that needs changing, that's bad. That doesn't mean we don't need changing, of course. But how we change and how we view the change, if we start to see it as bad, we're already back into duality and separation. So it's a kind of subtle line that we have to walk between wanting to practice and at the same time being forgiving of who and what we are, and that we will fail. And then, most importantly, we keep our vision on the sense not of that this I is wrong or deluded even. Incidentally, does anybody know the difference between delusion and illusion? A delusion and an illusion? Yeah.
It's an illusion outside of yourself and a delusion
inside. Yeah, I thought we were deluded, thus we have an illuded view of the world. Something like that. Yeah, so the illusion is outside and the delusion is inside. Yeah, that's a good way to say it. Thanks. Yeah. So we act as though that we already understand that this small self, which causes lots of trouble, and I hope this resonates with folk, that this small self does cause us a lot of troubles. You know, this idea, particularly when we really want to defend this and we have a fixed view of how it should be and how it should be treated. When we are attached, we actually initiate and prolong the sense of separation when we keep focusing on the I. So it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. If we believe we're separate and we're struggling to not be separate, to embrace our life as a whole and to feel a relationship with everyone else and the whole planet, if we believe that we have that separation, then we're already separate. So what I'm saying is that we have to act as if, even if we haven't really felt it in our bones, that we are in fact intrinsically free. And an awful lot of the things that we see that trouble us, that upset us, and please don't think I set myself apart from this, are self-created. They really are. They're created on the back of your idea of who you are, and your idea of who you are was created by you. So, in a way, we're all carriers of our own salvation. We're all the vehicles for our own salvation, but it's a big job. It can go on. It could go on to your last breath. And I can say more about the way we might proceed, but I don't want to. I should tell you that in a way, the next Crosby retreat, which I've forgotten what it's called now.
Stepping out of self-deception.
What's it called?
Stepping out of self-deception.
A lot of the talks that I'm giving are kind of rehearsals for the 2 talks I have to give there. So, because I've been thinking about it, really interests me. So I don't want to go further on this because we haven't got time anyway. But the important thing is for me anyway, the really important thing is to see that a powerful sense of self does cause us a lot of knotty problems. And how can we loosen its grip? Yeah.
Can I ask something,
Yeah.
Sensei? As you were talking about fluctuating, the thing that often happens to me is that I either have a powerful sense of self, and then I'm right and everyone else is wrong.
Yeah.
But the backside of that is the alternative to that is that the sense of self gets very weak.
Yeah.
So both those things that you said.
Yeah.
And then, I'm too small, I can't, they're right and I'm wrong. And,
Yeah.
So it's not so much, that's the thing I get.
Yeah,
You can
yeah.
say anything about that.
Yeah.
That's what happens to me.
No, I understand that, but in effect, one of the issues may be that you're bringing an either-or view to it. They're either I'm right and they're wrong, or they're wrong, they're right and I'm wrong, And in fact, from each person's perspective, there's a possibility that they're both right for them.
Sure. But it's more the feeling of sort of feeling I won't be attacked.
Yeah. Do you won't be?
Won't be attacked, protection.
Oh yeah.
Or a feeling of too vulnerable,
Yeah.
It's not really right and wrong isn't really quite.
Well, yeah, you're right. Thank you for clarifying. That's not right, wrong. But remember, a while ago, I read something from Chogyam Trungpa. I think it was called the Roar of something. The Roar of the Lion, was it?
Mm-hmm.
And he said the real roar of the lion, the real bravery, was the willingness to be vulnerable. So in those situations you're talking about, the willingness to allow yourself to feel that, rather than resisting it, is being the warrior. Is being a real warrior rather than the one who goes out and stuff. But that does take bravery, doesn't it? And we do avoid it, and each of us does. But I suspect that that's the only way through.
Just a couple of thoughts that raises. One is, looking at very young children, for example. When does the sense of self start to develop?
Yeah.
The notion that maybe it comes along with language seems interesting, but it is so powerful. I mean, even when we say that the self is a product of my imagination, well, who's that?
Yeah.
It's so engrossed in our language, and it's really difficult to set out of it. But at least when we sit Zazen, we know what we're, as you say, if you're trying to do something to get rid of the self, you're on a mission that failed already.
Yeah.
Because you are going to get rid of the self yourself.
Yeah.
But here's a question coming. We're just sitting Zazen, and we're saying, let go, just step back, watch the thoughts arise, watch them disappear.
Yeah.
So the question is still, there's a paradox still, isn't it? Who is it?
Yeah.
Or what is it that is watching and observing the passage of thought?
Yeah.
Even in an attempt to let go of that process.
Yeah. Well, I think the flip of that. I mean, what you're describing is insight. For example, insight meditation is a wonderful practice. It's a great practice, and a lot of people really benefit from it. And it's very popular. But as you described, as may happen in Zazen, there's an observer observing you, not trying to attach to the I. So what I thinkers who move on from that. And that's a very useful stage to be in, because it allows us to kind of see how we work. But remember, before Christmas I talked about, instead of you being aware of what John's... So does this awareness being aware of John, what John's doing, and this awareness is aware of what he's doing. And John's aware there's an awareness aware of what he's doing, yeah. So, but the trick is to become the awareness itself. So there isn't an observer, there's just John being spontaneously John, and being part of being the whole thing that's feeling John and seeing John, but isn't only John. So you know that you're part of the awareness of everybody in this room. You're part of the awareness of the walls, of the candle, of the very, you know, whatever you want to call it, the very fundamental or the fundament. You are that when you're doing Zazen. And then there isn't an observer, there isn't a, you know, Gurdjieff used to have that whole thing as well, of there being, you know, of always checking yourself, of always clocking yourself, of always being aware of exactly what you're doing and where you are in a situation and how that person's relating to you and how you're relating to that person. I think it's tiresome.
Yeah.
And people who really work at that level, I think they're uncomfortable to be with because they never feel like they're really being who they are. So, yeah. But that's just my view, you know. Obviously there are very different views.
The difficulty is that anything can end up propping up the self again.
Anything can, yeah.
Even mindfulness.
Even mindfulness, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Haven't you got to go through mindfulness first, though?
Pardon?
Haven't you got to go through mindfulness first? Funnily enough, I was doing the Who Is This, you know, the Martin Batchelor one.
Yeah.
While I was sitting today, Who Is This?
It's a great question. Or what is this?
Or what is this?
Yeah.
Though I heard it on tape and she says it in a French accent.
Oh, really?
Makes me laugh. I went, Who is this?
Yeah. Great.
If you keep saying it over and over again.
That's not mindfulness, though.
No, it's
That's
not
a crucial question that really leaves you. The wonderful thing about questions like that is they don't leave the self anywhere to stand.
No.
Where are you going to stand with that?
You can't.
You can't, can you?
You did something just before Christmas when you did We Are the Awareness.
Yeah.
And that stayed with me. I keep trying to get back to it.
Yeah.
Because I felt it straight away when you did it just before Christmas. And that's where I keep trying to go. Who is this? Helps with that because you become
it.
awareness. You, everything else goes.
Mm. Yeah.
Sometimes,
yeah.
Really.
It's a great question.
Mm.
Yeah. What is this? Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Okay, I think. Oh, have you been recording this? Anyway, I think for Wednesday night we've had. It's quite profound enough, don't you? We need to go and have a beer or something now. Thank you. Thanks.